Do I smell a flour grinder restoration? Let's go check it out.
We were at the local antique shop and we found a grinder. So we'll be able to restore this and grind up some flour. So his first step was to take out the pin that was kind of holding everything together. So to restore this grinder, my plan was to take it apart, clean it, bake it, oil it, and then put it back together. I then took off the outer pieces as well as the outer grinding plate. I took a look at the inner grinding plate and saw that it was just attached by some flathead screws. Definitely looked pretty rusty. Taking it apart not only allowed me to get in the little nooks and crannies a lot easier, but allowed me to kind of assess how it's constructed as well as determine the condition of each piece individually. I didn't really have any expectations as to how hard it was going to be to take apart. I was prepared for it to just be like entirely rusted together. The most difficult part was probably the handle because it was like pretty stuck to the shaft that it was on. So now we see here all the pieces laid out. It's really not that complicated, which I really appreciate. This is where we see me starting to load it up into the bucket, thinking I'm just gonna blast it with CLR. Really all that loading it up into this bucket did was show that it can in fact fit in this bucket. My plan was to initially just blast it with CLR, which is calcium lime rust. I think that's what it means. And it's just like removes rust stains from things. And we just kind of had it. So I was like, oh, we could use that. Luckily I did a little bit of research just to make sure it doesn't react well with cast iron apparently, and at least the grinding plates are cast iron. And magically, you'll also see the wire brush appear. This was kudos to my wonderful wife, who has a massive brain and remembered that we had that, and it would be a very good tool for scouring. And steel wool, just to scour it, just like you would with a cast iron pan. That's kind of how I treated it. I took off the big chunks of rust dry, just to kind of flake it off. And then when I got into the finer particles that would kind of create dust and stuff, I opted to just use water as not a solvent per se, but just as like something to trap the rust dust, understanding that I couldn't leave the water sitting on it for a long time. I brought in some salt. Just to like add an extra level of abrasion, even though I was using steel wool and the metal wire brush, I figured salt could potentially help with increased abrasion. The hardest thing to clean was probably the smaller grinding plate, the outside grinding plate that's not directly attached to the thing itself because it had smaller little rivets. So when I was working on the bigger pieces, it was fine using my bare hands, but I got down to some of the smaller pieces and I like pretty quickly just like poked a hole in my finger with the wire brush. So opted to use the rubber gloves that are fit for handling spiky fish. It probably took me about 2 hours to scrub it clean. It was totally worth it to clean it off. It looked completely different afterward. The handle had the most dramatic change. After scouring and scrubbing the parts, I decided to bake them in the oven at about 350 just to get the water out of it so that it wouldn't create rust, especially on the cast iron pieces. With metal and cast iron, you can't just wipe water off. It'll stay in the pores of the metal. Just like a cast iron pan when you go to season it. So basically I went through the process of seasoning this. Dry it off in the oven to quickly get all the water out of the pores. I didn't bake the handle because it has wood on it and I wasn't sure if I would like char the handle or crack it or something like that. So I just left it in the sun because it's basically a small oven outside. Then I decided to just kind of oil the wooden part because you can help wood, like it's good for wood to be oiled, just kind of like you see in the woodworking stuff. apply oil and bake it again to get all of that oil in those tiny pores. I used coconut oil. It was the highest smoke point oil that we have. A lot of things online suggested to use mineral oil, like food grade mineral oil. We don't have that. We didn't have that on hand, and I really wanted to do it. And if I were doing a cast iron pan, I'd use coconut oil. Metal, at least. You want to wipe off the excess oil after baking it, after seasoning it, in order to keep that oil, to prevent that oil from picking up a lot of like dust and particles and just stuff that it touches. It would just kind of get gunky. And the oil that you need on the surface is at that point already absorbed into the pores of the metal. Yeah, I used paper towels to wipe up the oil, and since we compost as much as we can here, they were perfectly fit to be composted. So after assembling this and using it and searching online for what this is, because it had OB and made in Poland on it, I actually found versions of this on eBay and realized that as I kind of suspected, we are missing a piece to it, which is actually quite an important piece. It's a clip kind of thing that holds the outer grinding plate steady, as well as determines how far it is from the inner grinding plate, so that they aren't grinding against each other, and you can choose the granularity of the grind. So previously, when I was trying to get the handle fixed more tightly to the shaft of the auger, I smashed my thumb by accident. I'm really not sure how I did it. Going back through my memory, I feel like my thumb was really far away, but somehow I just hit it directly like a cartoon. And I haven't broken any bones in my life, so that was some of the worst pain I've ever felt. Certainly not the worst pain a human being could feel, but the worst pain I've felt. And now I have a pretty purple thumb to show for it. So I finished the grinder thing. It works really well. Could work better. I think there's a little bit of troubleshooting to be done. Overall, it went pretty well and kind of as planned. I'd say that definitely check out antique stores. We're definitely going to be keeping our eye out for more things that are more manual or just sturdier. I really like things that are all metal. It's not going to break really easily. Learn to keep fingers out of the way of things, because I bashed my thumb pretty good trying to put on the handle at one point, something I've never done. Definitely not fun. Thumb smashing rite of passage, 1 out of 10. Would not do again. So there's this really expensive commercial version of a flour grinder. It was like hundreds of dollars. Being able to get this for $15 at an antique shop, regardless of its condition, it's not in perfect condition. It gets the job done, and it just kind of goes to show, like, taking some time to think things through can present opportunities that you can take advantage of. Don't jump at the first thing. That's kind of what I learned a little bit. I tend to be someone who's like, I see a solution, I'm just gonna go with that. And in certain scenarios, that's useful, but when it's, not a urgent need, you can take some time to let opportunity come to you. That's my take on it. The f*** was that?
For my next remix.
Oh yeah, you have that audio now.
Baba Booey.
Check.
That's tart.
Check. Mic check.
I like tart.
Testing 1 2 3.
Apple. I like
Baba Booey.
apple. I like
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2 3. Re.
apple.
Testing 1. Test.
Baba Booey.
Testing 1 2 3.